everyone and welcome to this week's webinar. So this week we're joined by Tess, who's going to be showing us how we can create beautiful PowerPoint presentations. Feel free to ask any questions throughout the webinar, and I'm just going to pass over to Tess now, and I hope you enjoy.
Hi everyone. So I am excited to be here to share the tips and tricks that help me create very clean and professional PowerPoint presentations. My hope is that when we are finished with this webinar, you have some things that you can instantly do to spice up any PowerPoint that you are currently working on, or just want to improve so that it looks a little better. So let's jump into what we're going to cover during our time together. The first thing we're going to talk about is the traditional bullet list. I hate a bullet list. It is the go-to way to show information on a PowerPoint, and I'm going to give you some ways to think outside of that traditional bullet list and present information differently. We will also talk about using images for impact and thinking about how an image can best convey your point. The third thing we'll look at are charts. A lot of times information in PowerPoints gets thrown onto the screen in either full complete sentences where you've got a paragraph on the screen, or again, a 10-point bullet list. This is not the best way to share information to an audience. What happens is that as we're creating PowerPoint decks, we are thinking about all of the things we want the participant to know, and we think that we need to put all of those things on the PowerPoint slide, and we don't. So one of the ways that we can convey information and make sure that we have enough information on the screen is to use a chart. And then I will end with my favorite tips. So there are some must-haves that I always use when I am creating my PowerPoints that make me feel like I've got a very professional deck to share. So I will share those favorite tips with you as well. Before we jump in, feel free to ask a question at any time. So what I'll be doing is going back and forth between presentation mode and design mode. So I'll show you a slide and I'll talk about it. And then in some cases, I'm going to show you how I actually made that slide, which I think will be really helpful. So if you have a question, I will be stopping and answering questions along the way. And we will also have some time for Q&A at the end. So let's get started. The first thing that is the biggest issue is the traditional bullet list. So we want to put everything on the screen, like I said, that we want the participant to know. So here's my point. Oh wait, here's another point. Oh, let's keep going. I have 5 more points, and I'm going to keep on typing bullets until I get every point that I want to share on the screen. This doesn't work. The more information we put on a PowerPoint slide, the less people actually listen to us. In fact, what they do is read like the first 3 things and then glaze over because no one can process all that information. If you don't take anything else out of this webinar today, maybe you'll take this. Stop putting every piece of information on a slide. Instead, while you're designing your PowerPoint, think to yourself, what can participants hear and what can participants see? So what you want them to see are the 3 to 4 most important things. But they can hear up to minutes and minutes of content, even though it's not all on the slide. For instance, look at this slide. I could have given you a bulleted list of all the reasons bullets are painful. Instead, I gave you a really funny image that really does convey how hopefully everybody feels when there are too many bullets on a slide. And now you're listening to me to see what I have to say based on this picture. So you're more interested in the presentation because I gave you an interesting picture, not because I put everything on the slide that I wanted you to know. Here are some of my favorite tips for using bullet points, or for not using bullet points. So the first one is use icons. Icons are a very clean way to make a point on your PowerPoint screen while not putting too much information. And bonus points if you can find an icon that visually represents what you're trying to say. So we all know, hopefully, that people have different learning styles. Some folks are auditory learners, so they learn best by hearing. Some folks are visual learners, they learn best by seeing. Some folks are kinesthetic learners, they learn best by touch. Well, when you use an icon, you are actually getting you're actually hitting three types of learners. So visual in two ways, visual by an image and visual by text on the screen, and then auditory by whatever you say that supports the icon. So you're hitting two types of visual learners and the auditory learner when you're using icons. Now, I have a free favorite icon site that I'll share at the end, but there is one trick on this screen that could be useful. We don't always find the icons we're looking for. So when you see these three icons, you notice that I was looking for something colorful. I was also looking for something modern and something a little complex, so not just a simple line drawing. Well, I was able to find that on the yoga icon for point 1 and the pencil icon for point 2, but I couldn't find exactly what I wanted for point 3. So I'm going to go into design mode and show you what I did. For point 3, I downloaded a picture and I went to the cropping tool and I cropped that picture to a shape and I chose a circle. You can crop any picture into a circle shape and it becomes an icon. So let me show you what the picture originally looked like. Whoops, I clicked off of it. So the picture was originally a square, you can see it there, and it was actually really big. So I reduced the size and then I chose crop to shape and cropped it to a circle. And now all of my icons match. I could have cropped it to a triangle if I wanted to and made 3 triangle icons. Maybe that would have worked. Wouldn't have worked for this picture, but it might have worked for something else. So there's a quick tip that hopefully you take back today, using the cropping tool to make your own icons. But again, I'll show you at the end of the webinar how to, the site that I love for free icons. Another way to share information without using bullets is to create shapes. So I could have presented this information like this. Hey, it gets my point across, right? It shows very succinctly what I'm trying to say. I don't have too much information on the screen. But you know what? It's boring. So instead of using a bulleted list, I decided, let me make a simple square and add some circles on top. Now, I want to pop out of presentation mode and show you how I did this because it might look a little complex, but it's actually very easy. Let me get rid of this text box, and now we have my shapes. First, I want to show you that I use the grouping tool. When I make a lot of shapes and I want them to animate in together, I group everything together so that it's one big shape. Right now, I'm going to ungroup so that all of my shapes are individual. Now, I told you that I made a square first, and this doesn't actually look like a square. Let me show you the trick I used. There is a white circle here, see that, covering the square. So I made a white circle, and I have 4 of them, and that's the first layer on top of my square. And then I made another circle, and that is my second layer on top of the square. And here I'm using my, here I'm using my arrow keys to try to get that spacing right. So really, there are 2 squares here. There's the yellowish square on top, and there's a white square underneath that breaks this a white circle underneath that breaks this bigger square up so that it looks a little more fancy. Now, I certainly could have just put this circles beside the square, but I really liked this idea. I saw something similar online and thought, I can recreate that. So let me try, and I did. Now, because, and again, I'm using my arrows to try to get this in line, because these are different shapes, I could actually animate them in. So I can select both of those circles and have it appear, so that what would happen, if I did it to all four, then what would happen is the square would be up first and then each would pop in. So that's a neat idea too. So we talked about icons, and the next tip that I just shared was creating shapes to show information in a different way. I am going to talk about smart art in another section. Smart art I consider to be a chart, and it's not always as user-friendly as I would like, which is why I advocate creating your own shapes to type information in. One other thing that I do want to share about this slide. So when you create a shape and you want to type in that shape, here's what happens. Uh-oh. Looks like my screen has frozen. Let's see if I can make that change. Uh-oh, this isn't good. Any recommendations? Hey, Sydney, I'm having a little bit of technical difficulty.
Oh.
There we go.
I was just about to say,
Uh-oh.
is it sorted it out now, or?
I think so.
Okay.
Woo! Okay, that was a close one. Thank you. One of the things that I do want to show about typing in shapes is that when you create a shape, you can right-click in the shape and edit the text. But here's the thing about that. I actually feel like it looks more professional to create a text box and put it over top of the shape. And then you're able to line up, see these grid lines, you're able to line up each text box with the other ones you create, so that if I have 2 or 3 lines of text, it actually, it actually looks more clean on the slide to create a text box rather than to try to type directly into the circle. Let's try this again. One of the neat things you're seeing right now are my beautiful kids. Let's see if we can get this back up and going. Sorry about this, everybody. Anyone have any questions while we're waiting?
Someone's just asked, what is the version of PowerPoint that you're using?
Oh, I'm using 2010.
Cool. But yeah, that's it. That's the only question.
Okay. Great. Another way that I like to rethink bullet points is to say it with pictures. So instead of having 3 bullet points on the screen, look what I've done here. I have created, or I've copied and pasted 3 pictures onto the screen, and I've cropped them all to be the exact same size. So you'll notice throughout this webinar that I really love the cropping tool. It's the best way to make a very beautiful PowerPoint presentation, because you can make sure your lines are straight, you can make sure everything is the same size, and you can crop into different shapes. So here I have 3 pictures, and I've just put my text right on top of each picture. This is a neat little trick called a transparent box that I've put behind the text, so I'm going to show you how to do that on another slide. So anytime you're thinking about using a bullet point, you might instead choose to say it with pictures. And sometimes those pictures might not even need any text, because they are their explanation enough. Now, I really like to do this method in a different way. So on this slide, what you're seeing is a title, Say It with Pictures. And I have this on here specifically for the webinar. But if I were going to do this for a presentation for others, I would actually do it like this. I would have my slide blank, and I would animate each picture in. This is much more impactful. So what you see here is a blank slide, and as I make my points, I animate each picture in. So now they take up the full screen, and imagine the impact of that when there's a huge screen that the room is looking at, and a third of the screen is one picture, and a third is another one, and a third is the storm. These are visuals that will stick. And when you animate them in, let's say I get to this second one and I've got barbed wire up and it's a metaphor for something I'm talking about, the audience is going to wonder what's coming next. And they're going to pay more attention because they're going to go, ooh, what does Tess have for this third picture? She's already used cows and barbed wire. That's really weird. And it's a way to pique interest as well. Whereas a bulleted list of 3 things doesn't pique as much interest. So again, I found these pictures, I cropped them, and I made sure they were all the same size and that my screen was divided equally into thirds. One way that I do that is by going to View and looking at grid lines. So if you don't use the View Grid Lines tool, try it out. It's an easy way to make sure that everything measures exactly the way that you want on a slide. So grid lines is one of my favorite tricks. Okay, so those are our 3 sections of, or 3 tips for how to quit bullet points. Let's move on to the next section. Images. So many PowerPoints are still using clip art from the 90s. You know what I'm talking about. The cartoonish clip art that when you do a Google image search or a Bing image search, it's the first thing that comes up, and it's not professional. It also diminishes the impact of your message because it's really hard to, well, A, it's distracting, and sometimes it's hard to take what someone is saying seriously when they have cartoon clip art on the slide. So I would challenge you to find really crisp professional pictures, and I'll share my 2 favorite sites with you at the end, when you are creating your PowerPoints, because those images go a long way. This is one of my favorite images to use because instead of just writing agenda on a PowerPoint slide, I actually will make a text box and type directly on to these lines. And it's kind of a neat way to show the agenda for a class. So I have a few pictures that I really love that I incorporate over and over into PowerPoints. This one, it doesn't matter if the audience is the same because it's a very standard agenda slide. Other pictures I'll only use over and over again if I have different audiences, because once you've seen the barbed wire picture once, it doesn't really have the same impact the next time or the next time. So let's take a look at some great ways to use images for impact. I am a big proponent of the bigger the image, the better. The bigger the image, the more impact it's going to have on your audience. Because if it's a great image, like this one of the mountains and the horizon, it makes the participant wonder what you're going to talk about. It makes them appreciate the thought and effort you've put into the PowerPoint slide, and it just looks different. And anytime something looks different in a PowerPoint, it catches the participant's eye. So if we are scrolling through pages and pages of bullet points, your audience shuts down. You've seen one bullet point, you've seen them all. But when your slides go from one neat way of looking at an image to another neat way, it piques interest, because now I want to know what that next slide is going to be and what's the metaphor for this image that you're using. So here is an example of a title slide I might create where the image is the entire screen and the title is at the top. I don't like typing text directly on a picture because it gets lost and it can be hard to see, especially if you're presenting to a big room and you've got people sitting in the back. So a trick that I use is a transparent box behind the text. So let me show you how to do that. And it looks like my PowerPoint is struggling as I am flipping back and forth between presentation in design mode, but we're going to cross our fingers and hope this works. Okay, so I've got a few elements on the screen here. I've got my picture and I've got a shape. So what I did was insert shape and I chose a rectangle. So here's my rectangle. I'll line it up so you can get the full effect here. And I went to shape outline, no outline, and shape fill gray. I really like gray when I'm creating my transparent text boxes, and you can choose any color you want, but my go-to is gray. Now here's how you make it transparent. You can go to Format Shape, so I right-clicked on my shape here, and I went down to Format Shape. And under this Fill option is the transparency slider. So now I can make it as transparent as I want. Let's do, I don't know, let's do 40% on that one. So here you see I've just created a second transparent box. So there's two ways to put my text in here. I can right-click and put Edit Text. And then if I do that, I need to go and align it left. Let's make it a little bigger. There we go. Or I can just insert, let me delete this and show you the other way. I can insert a text box on top of it. So here's my text box. Well, thanks PowerPoint. There we go. And then the same thing, I would change the color, change the size. So you can type directly into that transparent box or add a text box on top of it. So that transparent box is something that you will see me use quite a bit. You've seen it already on a few slides, and I think I actually have it on a couple more too. It's one of my favorite tricks. Something else I really like to do is use pictures that look good on a white background. So I think that this kind of visual is actually really neat. You have this picture of people raising their hands, and it looks like it just flows on the screen. When I am looking for a picture like this, sometimes I can find it on one of my favorite sites, but sometimes I just have to Google it and see if I can find something that's going to work. I do this with pictures that go across the bottom, like you see these hands raised. I do it with pictures that go down the right or left side, or even that go down from the top. It's a neat way to use an image that makes an impact but looks different. See how different it looks from our pretty mountain slide with our transparent text box over to our slide that looks like it just flows with this white background. So another tip when you're searching for images, so this image that I searched for, the hands were on a white background. But if you search for .png files, .png files already have transparent backgrounds and will show up and look good on a white background. So a .jpg, a JPEG, is the typical picture format. But when you're looking for images, you can type in PNG as part of your search. So here I could have typed in hands raised PNG. And what that will return for me in my Google search are images that have a transparent background. And that way I know that they're going to look good on the white screen. So there's another little tip, the searching for PNG picture files. This is the last way or the last tip I have for using images with impact. So this is actually just a couple of things combined into one. I've got my big image. I love images that take over more than half of the screen. One of the reasons I like that is because it forces us to type less on the screen, right? I've got my transparent box down here and my section title, or the theme I want everybody to remember, on top of that transparent box. So normally what we see on PowerPoint slides is a section header at the top and then numbers 1, 2, 3. And another way to create a beautiful PowerPoint presentation is to put your section header in a different spot. So here, I could have put it at the top up near these paintbrushes. I could have made this picture smaller and had this whole top be the white background with the title on it. Instead, I decided to make it a little more interesting. And I put the section header down here close to the bottom. So it draws your eyes left, and then you have to look right in order to see what points I want to make. So another tip is, instead of putting your images, or excuse me, your titles at the top, like I did with Leading Through Change and this slide, is to put them somewhere else on the slide. Make them stand out. So here's what this box is for. Draws your eyes down here, but make them stand out. People will know it's your title. It doesn't always have to go at the top. Again, 3 points is enough for one slide. Notice how there's a lot of white space on top and a lot of white space on bottom. That's absolutely okay. The numbers are a different color, so it adds a little more visual interest. And I realize that numbers are just another version of bullet points, and that's okay. Sometimes you do need to have a list, but notice how short the list is and how the slide is still visually interesting, even though there's a list on it. So we've talked about icons and we've talked about images. Now let's talk about charts. Always use them. Always use charts. People learn best when information is organized in a visual way. So yes, pictures are visual, but when you have a lot of information for someone to digest, creating some type of chart takes it up a notch, helps a participant really digest what you're trying to say. So this chart I did not make. This chart is a picture that I got from my professional learning network. You can see down here the citation. So sometimes I use charts that themselves are pictures. But I do have some favorite ways that I use charts, so I'm going to share those with you. The first way is to create my own. This is a very simple chart that has 3 circles and 2 arrows. And look how neat it is. So I want to, hopefully PowerPoint will let me do this. I want to go into design mode and show you the easy way that I made this chart. Circle, type some text directly on top of it, but here's what makes it the best. So without these arrows, they're just actual squares. But with these arrows, there's just another neat element to our chart. So what I did here was insert shapes, and I just inserted an arrow. So here's my arrow, okay? Now, you have to do some formatting here on the arrow. So let me bring up my formatting box. I'm going to right-click and choose Format Shape. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is Begin Arrow Type. So I chose the dot. And the next thing I'm going to do is increase the width. So now you can see it's a little crooked. Let me go over here. There we go. I changed my height to 0, and that's how I made sure that it wasn't crooked anymore. So now I've got the exact same arrow, and I'm going to just change it to white. So that's a really neat way to add a visual design element. Something else I want to show you about this top chart before we look at that bottom one. I love going to shape effects because it adds a little bit of a 3D element to any shape. Let me take the effect off that I love, and you can see now the difference. See how this circle just is very, very two-dimensional, and how this one has that little bit of a shadow? My favorite shape effect is the shadow effect, and I always do outer and this first one. I find it's the cleanest, and it's the simplest, and it's the most professional. So I put that same shadow effect on all 3 of these circles. So for this chart, I just did 3 things. I made a circle, I added shadows to the circle, and I made and edited arrows. And that's it. This bottom chart is actually SmartArt. So if you're not using SmartArt, it is one of the easiest ways to get a chart into your PowerPoint. It's as easy as going to Insert, SmartArt, and you've got all sorts of graphics already preloaded into PowerPoint. Also, you can go to office.com and find more. Sometimes I have a difficult time with SmartArt because the shapes don't let me type enough information in them, or it just gets to looking too complex. But I do like some of the simple SmartArt charts, and so here's one that I'm using. It's the exact same information as the one on the top. Something neat about SmartArt that a lot of people don't use is the design features. So when you choose your SmartArt, so there's the layout I have, you can actually change how the shape looks. There's already a lot of different options, so you don't have to design your own, and a lot of these can make your PowerPoint look much better than just the two-dimensional shape. You can also change the colors. I really like these ombre ones. They look very clean and professional. For this one, I chose to just do the same effect that I did on this top chart, which was to make the different, the shadow on each arrow. So these 2 types of charts, very simple. The top one I made myself with a little bit of creativity, and then the bottom one is SmartArt. Here's another way to use a chart. Use a table. Now, a lot of times we think that tables have to look like what an Excel chart would look like, but they actually don't. There are a couple of elements to this table that make it really stand out. So these are just 3 rectangles that I each made a different color. And then I put text boxes, right? So this text box, there's two text boxes on this page. Or on each square. There's this one that says 500,000, and then there's a second one underneath. I copied and pasted these text boxes into each rectangle and then typed over it. And then I actually added another fun little element, which was an icon for each fact. So this is a neat way to take that information to an additional level of understanding for your participant. So it's color-coded, it's in a chart format, it has different text sizes, and it has icons that represent what I'm trying to say. So piggy bank for money, a person for employees, and a thumbs up because we did it. All right. This is what I wanted to make sure I spent the most time on, my favorite tips. So far, we have gone through icons and quadrants and other tips for getting rid of bullet points. We've talked about using images for impact and how you can create that transparent text box so that you can put information anywhere on an image. And we've talked about a few other ways to use images for impact. And then I shared 3 types of charts that you can use to simply organize information. I've been giving you favorite tips throughout this, this webinar. So I talked about searching for .png pictures instead of JPEGs because those pictures will have transparent backgrounds, which can make your presentation pop even more. And I've given you the transparent box tip, which is one of my favorite ones, and also the shadow effects because it really helps your shapes to stand out. But there's actually a whole nother set of tips, some things that when I was making this webinar, I thought, what are my go-to tricks that I always find myself doing when I make a PowerPoint presentation? So here they are. Oh, one thing I do want to point out is notice my use of gray and white throughout this presentation. Some of my, or all of my section slides have a big picture and then a white background where the information is typed. Some of my slides, like this one, have a gray bar down the side with a lot of white space. And now for impact, I gave you a slide that has a completely gray background. So we're pretty far into the webinar, and I thought that by seeing this slide, it might have some of you who are maybe just half paying attention go, oh, that looks different than anything she's done. So another tip is to change the formatting of your slides. So you haven't seen a slide formatted like this throughout the whole presentation, and I purposely saved it until the last section to make it stand out a little more and to pique your interest a little more, since we've already been together for a while. So let's look at my tips. Sans serif fonts are the best. So let's take a look at what that means. Look at this serif font. See how the letters have these little lines at the bottom. They have these little dots that hang over the top. Basically, it's like little flaps. See those flaps off of the eye? Sans serif fonts don't have that. So these little flaps are called serifs. It is best when you're making a PowerPoint presentation to use sans serif fonts. Arial is a sans serif font. It is a go-to font. Calibri is also a go-to font that Microsoft PowerPoint has. Times New Roman is a serif font. Serif fonts are best when reading. A lot of books you read will be in serif fonts. Sans serif fonts are best for anything online, any type of webinar, of course, but any type of presentation. They're just cleaner and easier to read. Another tip is the color dropper tool. So I really love this tool because it adds a nice element to your PowerPoint presentation. Let me show you how it works. See how my text is in green, and this is a picture that I have used in another training. So see how this picture is a specific kind of blue? There is a way that you can make this text match this blue exactly. Let me show you how. I'm going to highlight my text and go to the font. And instead of choosing a color up here, I'm going to choose the eyedropper. I'm going to roll my eyedropper over that color blue, and I'm just going to click. And it turns the text the exact color of the picture. So let's do it again. I'm going to highlight my text. And if you don't have this quick toolbar, you can do it up here. I'm going to go down to the eyedropper tool. I'm going to hover over the blue and choose it. That's pretty neat. I can do it the same thing if we go back to this chart slide. I can change my text to this exact pink. So I love the eyedropper tool, especially when you are putting images into your slides and you want to visually have everything the same color. You don't have to take the time to try to figure out what the color is. Use the eyedropping tool. My last quick hit is to play with spacing. The paragraph tool is your friend. So what that means is up here in your PowerPoint ribbon, you click on the expand arrow in this paragraph box and go to spacing. So right now there is no spacing on my text, but I really like to use the after 6 point. It makes it easier to read for the participant, especially if I am in a big conference room trying to present. So notice how I've put the 6 point spacing, and this slide actually now looks a little cleaner. And the spacing is exactly the same between each section. So sans serif fonts, the color dropper tool, and the paragraph tool in order to play with spacing are some of my favorite things. Images. Here are my two favorite sites for images. This one on the left, pexels.com, completely free. Some pictures will ask for attribution. Some pictures have no attribution required. I love Pexels. They are really crisp stock photos. Every picture you have seen me use in this webinar is from pexels.com, 100% free. Sometimes it takes a little creativity to choose an image because their library isn't as big as the next site, which is iStock Photo, but they're free, and that's the best part. So start using Pexels to find some really great stock photos. iStock Photo is another favorite of mine, but these pictures cost money. If you work for a company that's willing to pay for a subscription or give you a certain amount of money a month in order to get some photos, it really is worthwhile. iStock Photos, there are millions of pictures in iStock Photo. And the great thing about it is once you've downloaded the picture, you can use it over and over and over again. You can also download the pictures in different resolution sizes, and you can in Pexels too. So iStock Photo is great. I just love it a little less because it's not free, but I do find myself buying pictures off of iStock Photo when I'm in need of a really particular kind of picture. The neat thing about iStock Photo is that they have pictures and illustrations. So you can look at illustrations, and they actually even have charts as well, and get an idea of a chart that you might want to use. And you can either buy it or you can make it yourself, which sometimes I do for inspiration. I go to iStock Photos and look at their illustrations, and then I try to recreate it myself. Here is my favorite icon site, flaticon.com. The majority of these icons are free, or you just use them with attribution. I love this site. I am able to find all sorts of icons to use. Sometimes when I don't know what icon to use, I start browsing through Flat Icon, and it actually shows me really great ideas. And it has they also have packages of icons that you can buy, but I have never bought anything from Flat Icon. I use the free ones, and then I use the ones that require attribution, and it's always worked for me. Everything you saw in this webinar came from Pexels and Flat Icon. Nothing came from iStock Photo, but that's not because it isn't great. It's just because I wanted to use stuff for free. Templates. So what you see in this PowerPoint presentation that I have right now is a template that I downloaded from Slides Carnival. I love Slides Carnival because they have really crisp, professional PowerPoint templates that you can use as a Google Slides theme or download as a PowerPoint template. So here's what that means. I do use Google Docs to create PowerPoints, and I actually have a lot of PowerPoints that I've made through the Google PowerPoint doc, but there isn't as much functionality in the Google PowerPoint doc as there is in Microsoft PowerPoint. So sometimes I will download the template from Slides Carnival directly to my, my PowerPoint program. The template that you saw me using today came from Slides Carnival. It's 100% free, no attribution required, and I just changed it up. I changed up how I wanted to use the layouts. Sometimes I just did a blank slide for impact. The neat thing about Slides Carnival is that when you view the, when you preview the template, you'll see that on every slide it gives you ideas for how to use, how to lay out your information on the slide. It's really cool. I really recommend it. Here are two other template sites. SlideModel.com and Google Slides actually has their own templates too. PowerPoint templates are really boring. They're very 1990s. They're not professional and clean and crisp. I would not recommend you use the PowerPoint templates that come from PowerPoint. Slides Carnival, Slide Model, and Google Slides, all great, all things that I love. So that's it. I've gone through all of the big buckets of things that I think make PowerPoint presentations beautiful, and I've given you my favorite tips and tricks. And so now I want to open it up for questions. I know we've had one already, but does anybody have any questions?
Just going to have a look through the questions. Well, we did have some questions, but they were kind of just answered just then, just about images and templates. Can you easily set up templates for favourite presentation styles? Is one of them.
What was that?
Right. Can you easily set up templates for favourite presentation styles?
Yes. Yep. In fact, what I have done is downloaded slides, a template from Slides Carnival, and then actually tweaked it to better fit my style, and then saved that as my own template in PowerPoint.
There's another one here. What is your process for creating a PowerPoint? Do you map out the information first, then create, or how do you go about it?
I love that question. So I try to create placeholders for each slide, so that I know, like, visually how my information is going to flow, and then I create the sections out of that flow. So like for this one, I knew I wanted to go through 3 categories and then a tips and tricks. So I made placeholder slides, which became my section slides, for each one, and then I would kind of storyboard, so put in a blank PowerPoint slide for each section and jot down the ideas. Oh, do I want to teach them about the transparent text box? Do I want to teach them about making the image a full screen? And then once it starts coming together, then I start plugging in my images and my text.
What else have we got? Quite a few now. What if you want to send the PowerPoint afterwards and have the content stick if there are no bullet points? Would you include speaking notes?
Yes, so I do that 2 ways. One is to include speaking notes. I actually have some on this slide, so you could send it out and then have participants print it off in notes format. Then that way they would see the slide in the speaker's notes. The other thing is, a lot of times I create a 1-page overview handout that accompanies a presentation, especially if I'm teaching a class that's face-to-face. I will have a PowerPoint much like what you all have seen, but then I will have a handout that has all the additional information. So like for this one, I might actually have the how-tos for how to make that transparent text box, how to make that chart with the white arrows and the colorful circles. And I would give that to you during the session so that you could follow along.
Eric says, could you please show the websites again? He missed the icon website.
Yep, and in fact, here's what I'll do. If we can make it work, everybody, I actually pulled all of them up. So the first one is Pexels.com. Now, something about Pexels that I want to share with you. So let's say I type in work. These are the free photos from Pexel. If you scroll down, the way that they make money is by also giving you pictures you can buy from Shutterstock. And that's going to be all the way at the bottom. Looks like I picked something too broad because we can't get to the bottom here. So let's try something else. Water hose. Oh, who knew there'd be all these pictures for a water hose? I should have tested this out. So, of course this happened. It's because I typed in water, right? Let's see, fire. Surely they don't have that many pictures for fire. They do. Okay, so you can try this out on your own. But what you'll find is when you get to the bottom of all the pictures that Pexels has, they are going to try to get you to click on the Shutterstock pictures and buy them. That's one of the ways they make money. So just pay attention to that. All of these pictures that I've been scrolling through for fire, these are all free. So we can click on this one and you can see free download, right? Here's the source that it's coming from. It's free for personal and commercial use, no attribution required. That's amazing. iStock Photo is the pay one. And then flaticon.com is the icon site. There's things in here you can buy, right? So these are packages that cost money right here at the bottom. But I can search, let's see, I showed you that yoga icon earlier. So here at the top are packages that cost money, but all these are free with attribution. Some of them are no attribution. And so there's that yoga icon that I used. And then Slides Carnival is the template.
any other questions? As an accountant, I need to present lots of figures to meetings. Do you have any recommendations on presenting financial data in PowerPoint?
That is a little outside of my area of expertise. Because in my experience with financial data, you actually do have to put a lot on the slide. One thing that I have helped our chief controller and accountants with at my current job is really putting less information on each slide. So whereas you might put 3 sets of data on one slide, encouraging them to chunk that into 3 slides so that it's bigger and easier to digest. I would also recommend to not use smart art in PowerPoint and to rather find some more creative ways or creative charts that are out there. Slides Carnival does give you, let me show you right here. Slides Carnival gives you, this is my favorite, the Ulysses presentation template. This is actually the one I used for our session. You'll see mine looks a little different, right? Orange, where I put gray, but you can see that it's very similar. Something that Slides Carnival will do is give you graphs that you can use. So you could easily present financial data on this slide, but it looks a lot better than using PowerPoint Smart Art.
What else have we got? Is there a guideline you use for font sizes and colours when the presentation is being shown on a large screen in a large room?
Yes. So I never go below size 18 font for a large room, and always make my titles in 48. In fact, for a really large room, I would never go below size 24 for basic text. So on my PowerPoint, let's see, if I were doing this slide in a large room, I would make this 24 at minimum. And then this one I would make, well, here it's 60, so I would actually keep that 60. And then always use sans serif. And then in terms of colors, basic is best for large presentations. So I never do like black on red or colorful backgrounds. You'll notice in this one I only did white background or this gray background. I keep it very simple because a lot of times people in the back of the room can't see. I also always only use white or black on top of color. So if I have a picture or I have a background like this gray background, I only use white or black text. I never try to use blue or red or yellow. It just doesn't work.
And Colin asks, could you please replay how to use the eyedropper tool?
Ooh, yes. Let's do it right here, Colin. Thanks for asking. So let's change favorite tips to this orange color in the quote bubble. So I'm going to highlight and go to my font color tool. I'm going to drop that arrow down beside it, choose eyedropper, hover over the color I want, and then you just click. And there it is. And I'll show it to you one more time. So I've highlighted, and I'll go up here in case you don't have this little pop-up, the little pop-up editor that I had. So up here in my ribbon, I'm going to drop down that arrow beside font color, choose the eyedropper. Let's see, now I'm going to change it to yellow. And there you go. Here's why I always stay with white though. See how this yellow, it's tricky if anybody's going to be able to see it. So I always use black or white on top of colors.
Great. Just going to check if there's anything else. How do you quickly shift between design mode and presentation mode?
Ooh, down here is the little presentation icon. So it's beside your zoom function, and it looks kind of like, I don't know, it kind of looks like a screen that you would pull down. So if I hover over it, it says slideshow, and so I click it. Then when I'm in slideshow, I just click escape. So the slideshow icon takes me into presentation mode, and then escape takes me out of it very quickly.
Great. I don't think we have any more questions. I'll give it a few minutes if anyone else has a question they want answered. I don't think so. No. What I will say quickly is that a few of you have been asking if there'll be a recording of this webinar. So like all our webinars, they are recorded and I'll hopefully get them edited and uploaded to our website and emailed out to everyone within the next sort of 48 hours, so you can all watch it whenever you want. So yeah, I think that's it if no one else has any more questions. Thank you, Tess, and I'll see everyone next week, hopefully.
All right, great. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.